today we're here talking about vaccination available for those 6 months and older. And so this is really a time to be hopeful. For those of you who care for children, the pediatricians on the line, this is something that we certainly have been advocating for in regards to ensuring that there were clinical trials to include our youngest population. And the AAP, as you can see here in our press release, does recommend that COVID-19 vaccination occur for all infants, children, and adolescents 6 months of age and older who do not have a contraindication to receiving a COVID-19 vaccine authorized or approved for use for their age. That includes a primary series and or booster doses as recommended by the CDC, and we're going to talk about that a little bit today. We have two products available for our youngest now. The FDA authorized and the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices voted, and the CDC subsequently recommended Pfizer-BioNTech for ages 6 months through 4 years, which is a 3-dose primary series. The same process took place for the Moderna products. Initially, ages 6 months through 5 years, which is a 2-dose primary series, was authorized. And then of June 24th, the FDA, from their prior authorizations and ACIP, met and voted that Moderna for ages 6 years through 11 and ages 12 years through 17 were also authorized, and that is a 2-dose primary series. These are wall charts that the FDA has, and I'm also going to share a resource that the American Academy of Pediatrics has created that can be helpful. And I strongly encourage individuals who are administering vaccines to print out these wall charts and have them visible in your clinic or your location where you're administering COVID-19 vaccines. So this is for the Pfizer product. And so as you can see here, so maroon, this is the product for 6 months through 4 years. It needs dilution before use. The amount of diluent needed is 2.2 and the dose volume is 0.2. For the purposes of this talk, I'm not going to go into the other age groups that you can see here, as these products have been available for 5 through 11 years, but certainly important to refresh yourself, your policies and procedures with what are you carrying at your clinic, and making sure that you're reviewing how to properly dilute these vaccines and properly draw them up and administer them, as well as storage. So this is for some of the formulations and storage as to where they can be stored in regards to the ultra low cold freezer, the refrigerator. So I think that there's a lot of concern with the Pfizer product that we frequently hear about storage challenges. So you can store this product for 10 weeks in the refrigerator. And then I think it's important in regards to the puncture time of the vial. So once you've punctured and have diluted the vial, it needs to be used within 12 hours. And so I think that's really important to keep track of that. And when you're strategizing, if you have or you haven't offered vaccines before, there's been multiple different strategies that people have used in regards to providing appointments. And I think there's been a lot of concern about waste. And we've seen that time and time again, people are concerned about wasting unused vaccines. Certainly, this is something that we in the American Academy of Pediatrics have continued to advocate for. But I think, at least for the foreseeable future, we're going to be having multi-dose vials. So the likelihood of wasting some vaccine is what we will see, but it's important to use the vaccine that we have to vaccinate those individuals who are willing to be vaccinated, because it's important to get that person vaccinated when they're choosing that vaccination. So in the Pfizer product for 6 months through 4 years, the vial, that's the maroon cap and a maroon border, the label may say age 2 years to under 5 years or age 6 months to under 5 years. And this has caused a lot of confusion. The ACIP discussed this, and these products are authorized for use. So regardless of if the vial says 2 years to 5 years, it is able to be used down to that 6-month age range. And so this has been a big area of questions that we've received in the state and concern. And I know that's conflicting to what we have typically said to do in regards to, make sure that you're following the label. This is in the EUA, which each of you should certainly review. But I think it's important to be checking what product your center is carrying and to go through your policies and procedures and know that this is an authorized vaccine that is being used. We're going to kind of go through some clinical considerations that I have found that are somewhat helpful in the pediatric population. The correct dose is based upon the child's age the day of the vaccination. So a lot of questions we've received is, my child is 4 and then they turn 5. They were 4 when they got the first dose and then they turn 5 when they would be due for their second dose, or, they change in age. They have their birthday when they're due for an additional shot. And so we have some resources that we'll talk about later that hopefully can help with that, because there are multiple scenarios that are authorized. In general, the recommendation is to stick with the product that you've received. So sticking with if you started with Pfizer, finish that through for the primary series. If you started with Moderna, finish that through. And the dosage is based upon the child's age the day of the vaccination. COVID-19 primary vaccination is recommended for everyone 6 months and older, regardless of underlying medical condition. There are very few contraindications to get vaccinated. And even those, if a child has an history of anaphylaxis, there is recommendation to talk with an allergist and immunologist and to assess that risk. Side effects was a frequent question. So I talked about the importance of talking about safety. Parents want to know about side effects. The side effects for children actually were very similar to the adults and even milder in most cases. So the typical side effects that we saw were pain, swelling, redness at the injection site. You can see fever, which can be common after vaccines in general, but we did see fever. Moderna had a little bit more fever compared to Pfizer. Fatigue, headache, chills, myalgia, arthralgias, and we can see some lymphadenopathy with the vaccine. Routine antipyretics or analgesics can be taken for post-vaccination local or systemic symptoms. Again, aspirin is not recommended in this age group for Reye syndrome, and generally don't recommend giving those products prior to vaccination, but if these symptoms do develop, those medications can be provided. I think it's important to talk about multiple vaccine administration. So the COVID-19 vaccine can be co-administered with other vaccines. The same day, a week later, this is a question that we've frequently got in the beginning of the rollout. It was recommended that you don't co-administer the vaccines, but this is now a recommendation since May of 2021. So for well over a year, we've been co-administering vaccines. If you are going to administer multiple vaccines, it's important to follow typical procedures to separate them, as you can see here, by intramore, but the vaccines can be co-administered with other vaccines. I do want to just briefly talk about myocarditis and pericarditis. This was a question that frequently came in. There is a rare risk for myocarditis or pericarditis following mRNA COVID-19 vaccination. They've occurred most frequently in adolescent and young adult males within the first week after receiving the second dose of an mRNA COVID vaccine. There could be an increased risk of myocarditis and pericarditis in males ages 18 to 39 following the second dose relative to other authorized or approved mRNA COVID vaccines. I always bring this up, and I think it's important, and this is a question I have frequently received. The risk of myocarditis and pericarditis from the actual COVID-19 disease is much higher than the small risk associated with vaccination. Given these risks, that's where there's been a potential recommendation of an 8-week interval between the first and second dose that you'll see in those charts that I just shared. And so this is something that the person would have a discussion with an individual for 6 months to 64 age if you would want to spread that interval out. It's important to note for people who are considered immunocompromised, it's not recommended to spread that out. It's really important that they maintain whether it's 3 weeks for Pfizer or 4 weeks for Moderna. I just wanted to offer some communication tips. So what are things to do when talking about COVID-19 vaccines? Start from a place of empathy and understanding. It's going to take many conversations. It's like planting a seed. If you plant a seed, somebody else comes along and they may water that seed. And over time, that person's confidence may grow to the point that they then choose vaccination for themselves or their child. So starting the conversation is important and revisiting it. Listen first and fully and provide information. Ask if you're able to provide information. Help them find their reason to get vaccinated. So this is some of that motivational interviewing. And then for those health providers on the call, your strong recommendation goes a long way. So I strongly recommend that your child get a COVID-19 vaccine. The shot is especially important because of your underlying health condition. I believe in vaccines so strongly. I got vaccinated as soon as I was available, and my daughter did the same. And then really wrap up the conversation with openness and a call to action. Leave that conversation open. I just want to share some brief things of what not to do. So really, this is hard, and this has been hard for me, but try not to repeat rumors, misinformation, or address their underlying concern. If they're worried about infertility, when I talk about that, I don't use that word. I talk about, these vaccines are safe and effective for people who are or want to become pregnant, and really get to the underlying issue that they're, addressing. So avoid the misinformation or myths, because unintentionally you may propagate that myth by repeating it. In responding, if the negative is false, the positive is true. So frame something positively. Again, if someone is talking about a negative aspect, really get to the underlying root cause of what their concern is and address it in a positive manner. One thing that I've really tried to do in these conversations is, instead of using the word but, say and. But can sometimes be very jarring to the individual. I hear you, blah, 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 but, talk about more so, I hear your concerns, and here's a resource that perhaps you could look at to give you more information, or, and I've looked at this type of research and this is what I know. Really no fear, guilt, or shame. We know that that doesn't work. You don't want to have any kind of judgment, and no overt persuasion or even the perception of it. It is important to tell personal stories. I've shared the story. I got vaccinated before I was pregnant. I got boosted when I was pregnant, and I had a baby girl in February, and I plan to get her vaccinated in August as soon as she becomes eligible. I just want to offer a few communication resources that we can do this campaign. The CDC, the AAP has many resources along with your state.